For 45 minutes, he talked to us, trying to convince us what he was doing was right, and we said no, and he left. We just fell into each other's arms, and I sobbed like I'd never cried before. My whole world was upside down.
My name is Jonathan Daugherty. I'm your host for today's program. Imagine what you would feel, what you would think, what you would do if one day your child came up to you and told you they were gay. That's exactly what happened to today's guests, Ted and Jan Schneider. It was devastating news to them, and they didn't know what to do. This led them on a journey to find hope and healing. Watch and listen to what they learned from this incredible trial of life.
We didn't know he was struggling. It caught us totally by surprise. Very active in church, doing all the things that you would expect. And he came home when he was 34 years old and said he needed to talk to us, and blew us away. Had no idea.
He said, "Mom and Dad, I've got something to tell you. I'm gay," and we just fell apart. And he was expecting us to throw him out. He told us that a lot of his friends, when they told their parents, that they would just make them leave, shut the door, don't come back. And we said, "We're not going to do that. We love you. You're our son." And so for 45 minutes, he talked to us, trying to convince us what he was doing was right, and we said no, and he left. And we just fell into each other's arms, and I sobbed like I'd never cried before. My whole world was upside down, and I really wanted to die. I didn't want to live anymore. And as days went by, we notified our family that was going to move in with us. His brother were moving from Michigan. We told him he'd better tell them because they're going to know something's wrong.
He had a partner who was moving in with him when he got back to Memphis. And he'd actually come a day earlier. He normally stayed over the weekend, but he came a day early so he could leave on Saturday because he had to go back. He had a friend being ordained as a pastor. Turns out that was his partner, and he was going to pastor the MCC church. He knew that they talked on the phone. Jan and Ken talked a lot on the phone, and he knew that we'd be calling and wonder, who's this guy answering the phone? So he really didn't have any choice, and he waited till the very last minute. One of the things we laughed about later was he came home, spent the weekend, and then he loaded his car all up. He'd never done that ever. That was always the last thing he did. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Well, when you look back in retrospect, believing we were going to throw him out, he loaded up the things he wanted because he figured he'd never get a chance. And it's humorous now. At the time, it's very, very painful.
Well, we were just in a fog. I really couldn't function. I had so many different thoughts. Like I said earlier, I wanted to die, and I also wanted to just go into a closet. And it wasn't that I didn't want to talk to people about it. Most parents don't want anybody to know. We wanted to talk about it. And we were told by 2 pastors not to talk about it. Don't tell anyone. To protect him. Well, he was already out and living with someone, and what would I protect him from? So I didn't understand all that, but for 8 months, we just told a few people to pray for us. And because they never were in this type of deal, they really didn't know how long to pray for you. They didn't know what to ask. We were just all alone in it. So my other thought was that I just want to be in a closet and not have to deal with it. if I'm in a closet forever, I wouldn't have to deal with it out in the public and see people and be around people while they're laughing and there's nothing funny going on. And then the Lord just showed me that not to waste the pain. The pain was so great. I didn't want God to waste it, to use it to His glory. We're here to glorify Him. And I wanted to glorify Him. And then the other thing was that I had thoughts of someone else being all alone, another couple finding out about a child and not knowing who to go to. And I just wanted to wrap my arms around them and say, I know your pain, and it's going to be okay because God's with you. And it will be okay. And it did. It turned out okay. I mean, we've met the most wonderful people. I just can't tell you how God has blessed us through this.
Our former pastor is retired, lived in the area, and he's still good friends with us. And we went to speak with him, and you know, his question was, what are you going to do? We shared with him that our pastor had a good friend down in Texas who had a daughter who had been in the lifestyle for like 15 years. And she had come out and was living free of lesbianism. And so our former pastor said, well, what are you going to do when you're going? You know, you need help. Our pastor arranged for us to go down and meet with his friend in Texas, and we spent a morning with them. They shared a lot of things that kind of help us get some direction. They had a young man come in who had a ministry down there. He had lived the lifestyle, had come out, was married, had a family and a ministry. He spent about 4 hours telling us about his life and all of that. And then that evening we spent some time with their daughter. So it helped. It helped us get a lot of things in perspective, but there was a lot of healing to come. It's something that just messes with your mind. You know, I think about Jan, you know, she had concerns about helping others and all of that. My life was getting my business going and doing all of that, and I just buried myself in work. And so, you know, if you stay busy enough, you don't think about the peripheral things. That's how I handled it for a long time.
I think every parent starts out in the wrong way. Most of them do anyway. And we were trying to tell him what Scripture said and all that. And he kept telling us that I've got some information, I'll send it to you, where it was translated wrong. They put the wrong words in there, and with the right words, it says it's okay what we're doing. And I said, no, I don't think so, Ken. Thank you for offering that. And I wish now that I had taken it so I would know what he was thinking and what his beliefs were. We kept talking. I mean, he wanted to keep in touch with us, but a lot of times we'd hang up angry with each other. And I think around the 6th year of going through this, we both decided he decided not to bring it up anymore. And we could laugh on the phone. We had a good relationship, and it was getting better. They had a ceremony too, like 19 months after he told us, after they moved in together, they had a ceremony. We were invited, and we did a lot of searching. And I told him, I said, I want to do what God wants us to do. And I can't give you an answer right now. Your dad and I will talk about it, and we'll get back with you. So I told Ted about it, and so I called a ministry up in Wichita. The director, who we were friends with, was out of town, but the guy that worked with him said, well, I've never been married and I don't have children, but my answer to you about going is God's not going to be there. And I said, oh, okay, because he wouldn't approve of it. And so I said, well, that answers my questions. So, of course, we didn't go. A few years ago, somebody said that you attend a wedding to bless them, to approve of it, to encourage them and all that. And you can't do that when it's a marriage that's not really a marriage, and between a man and a woman. So that was just confirming what we did that years ago is the right thing to do.
You know, because we made that decision, did not really adversely affect our relationship with him. I don't think he really expected us to come, but he did extend the invitation. We did have another really unique opportunity. Their church, they moved to Nashville, and they had a church that was primarily related to the gay community. And they had a lot of people in the church there. Either families had thrown them out or they lived a long way from their families. And so when Christmas and holidays came around, they always had a function at their home for a place for these people to go, because they didn't really have anywhere to go. And one Christmas, they invited us to come to we were coming to see them over that holiday, invited us to come to their home to this party. And so Jan and I discussed it, and it sounded like a good idea. I thought we ought to do that. And I think it really shocked our son when we said, yes, we'd love to come. Well, they were expecting half a dozen people or so. They had a house full of people. These people wanted to meet Ken's parents. It's because so many of them's parents just had nothing to do with them. And I remember talking to one young man there that was telling me about how his dad ran him off the property when he'd never been back, and he was working there in Nashville. It's just incredible what happens. Families don't know how to handle it, and they make their own decisions. And I just praise God that we didn't make too many bad decisions. And one of the things that I did not put enough effort into reaching out to him, just as my son. Jan kept saying, encourage him in the things he's doing and all that. And all I could see was homosexuality. And it made it very difficult to have a conversation. They were always very shallow, very short. And looking back on that, I could have put a lot more effort into that. I think it would have helped the relationship tremendously.
As a parent, a mother, after a couple of years of going through the grief, because it was as if our son had died, because he was a different person, completely different person, I discovered that I was in bondage just like he was. Thinking, waking up in the morning, I've got a gay son. Going to lunch with friends, and they're laughing and talking about stuff, and I'm hurting. And I think, this is terrible. I don't even want to be here. I thought about him then. Going to bed at night, I'd think I've got a gay son. And it was just consuming, all consuming to me. And one day the Lord just revealed to me, I can't tell you whether it was a whisper or what, but it was in my mind that I was in as much bondage as he was in that sin. I was in bondage with this all-consuming thing, because I have a family. I've got another son and grandchildren, a wonderful daughter-in-law, and I couldn't even function. And that began a healing in me to realize that. And of course, 13 months after he told us, we had our first support group meeting. Our pastor came to us one night, or I was walking out of the service with him, telling him about our visit with him that weekend. And he said, well, are you two ready to come out of the closet and start talking to people? And I thought that was so funny. And I said yes, and Ted said at the same time no. And so in my mind, I thought, well, we're just not ready yet. And someday we will, and he will be ready. And a week later, he says, I'm ready. And so 13 months later, we had our first meeting, and That was almost 17 years ago.
I'd sold my business, and we hadn't been to see Ken in over a year. And so the Labor Day weekend was coming up, and we thought, we ought to just go and spend a little time. And so called him and made plans to go. We had a great time. I love the Grand Ole Opry. He got us good tickets. It was a fun weekend. Everything went really well until we left town.
I studied about what I said for a long time and realized that I did not say it in the right way. We both went to our separate churches and then met for lunch on Sunday, and then we were going to drive home. As they were walking back to their cars, I said, "Guys," and they turned around and I said, "I just want you to know that we love you even though we think differently or we don't agree on everything, that we love you very much, and both of you." And his partner turned around and said, "Well, we don't agree with everything of yours either." And I was just shocked because I was talking from my heart, and I thought I was expressing love to them. And I could see the shock on Ken's face, and he always stood up for his partner, but I could tell that bothered him. Well, we got in the car and we talked during the week and everything. But over the years, I thought about what I said, and I can see how they took it. And I should have just cut it and said, "I love you very much, just want you to know that." That's all I had to say. So you learn things, the things you do wrong. And so we left, and they went on vacation, and 17 days after we saw him, on a Monday night, the police came to our door and said that he had been killed that morning in a car wreck. Our kids came over, and our son and daughter-in-law, and stayed with us till midnight and all the next day. And they had the funeral in Nashville, and then our pastor suggested that we have a memorial service here with our friends. And so we went through 2 services.
Yeah, I think the most difficult part of him dying was that it was just the end of the hope that you could see him walk free from that. And you have all kinds of visions for your children. This is not one of them. You envision family, kids, grandkids, all of the stuff that goes with that. And when that was gone, then the hope was that maybe at some day, he could walk free, we could have a testimony together. And that dream was gone. So the realization that it was over was tough for a while.
He told us that he struggled with this all of his life, and we never had a clue. We had no idea that he hurt all those years. So he was living that hard life of not having any men friends, guy friends, never until he was a senior in high school. And I knew that, but I didn't know the connection to the same-sex attraction at all. And so it was all new to us. So he thought we should be over, he just didn't realize it was all new to us, but he had lived with it all of his life, so it was kind of a conflict there.
There is one thing that I would share with any and all parents. We need to be very careful about what we say. And I was really devastated that my son was never able to come and share with me what he was going through. And, I don't know what I could have done, how much I could have helped, but I would certainly like to have been there to try. And then it was sometime later, just thinking, I thought about a conversation in our den one evening about some horrible comments I made about the gay population in San Francisco, not knowing he was struggling. And, I've regretted that because, first of all, it was the wrong thing to say. But most of all, because here he was struggling, and I didn't know it, and it had to be like a knife in his heart. So why would he come to me knowing what I felt?
I couldn't stand not talking about it, so I started searching around and found a lady in Texas who had a son who died of AIDS, and her husband was a pastor. And I called her, and we talked for a long, long time. And then she says, you need to get into a support group in your area. And I said, there is none. And she said, well, call Memphis. There's one there. So I called there, and there was a woman who, her son had died of AIDS. And we talked, and she said, you guys need to come down to our support group. So that was 8 months. And we drove down there and went to the support group. And it just freed us up because right off the bat in the meeting, she talked about, don't keep this inside. Talk about it to your friends. Just don't go talking to anybody, but safe, secure people. Talk about it so you have someone to talk to. But even then, I discovered, and of course we did that. We went home, and I said, when I left that meeting, it was like a 2,000-pound boulder off my shoulders. And we came back, and we were just free, or I don't know how Ted felt, but I felt free that I could talk about it. And then I discovered your friends don't understand. They've never done that before. So when we started the support group, it helped so much, probably helped us more than anybody else, because the healing began. And it was really 2 years before we got our joy back, because really Satan stole our joy, or at least mine, completely. And I got my joy back. I could laugh again, and it just got better and better.
As a parent, you feel isolated. Couldn't talk to anybody. Nobody would understand. Jane and I were a little different. We weren't hung up with all of the fears of what people would say or guilt or all of that. That just wasn't a part of where we went with this. But at the same time, keeping anything inside is just destructive. And, another thing we laugh about now, but I had several offices in my business, and one was 100 miles away, the other was 200 miles away. So I did a lot of driving. I'd go to the offices, and all of a sudden I realized I'd go in the office and my employees would all disappear. Well, they didn't know what was wrong. They knew something was wrong with me, but they didn't want to be around me. So when I was able to share with them what was going on, that put all of that behind us. And, just support group is extremely important, because you need a place to be able to talk these things out, and you realize you're not the only person in the world thinking this, feeling this, experiencing this.
In the beginning, I asked God not to ever let me forget the pain that this caused me. I wanted to remember the pain, so that when a parent came in, I can honestly say, I understand your pain. I don't want to forget how bad it was, because that's what they're going through. And so every time new couples, and right now we've had like 3 or 4 new couples come in the last few weeks in our group, and they are amazing, much better than we were.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of them.
One thing too, when Ken died, Jane and I kind of looked at each other and said, well, what do we do now? And, it didn't take long to realize that we weren't doing a support ministry for our son. We were doing it for those other families who needed help. And so we continued on. A lot of people say, why would you do that? Well, ministry was not for him. The ministry was for us. The ministry was for us to be able to help others who were walking down that same path.
It's hard to imagine enduring the pain that Jan and Ted did, much less asking God to never let you forget that pain. Yet God used this pain in the life of obedient believers to enable them to be the hands and feet of Jesus to other people walking in the same steps they did. If you have a loved one in the lifestyle, know that there are others out there with experience that can help. We also encourage you to pray and remember Jesus' offer. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I'm Jonathan Daugherty for Pure Passion.